Bienvenidos, worldwide fans of the planet's hottest entertainment with an edge. I'm En Fuego here, welcoming you to my namesake program, Enfuegotainment. Once more, you can just call me Fuego for short. And this is another rapido review of a film that just hit home release this past week. But that's the thing, a lot of people probably aren't going out and physically purchasing, DVDs and Blu-rays and stuff like that, or going to a red box, although I braved it with my gloves and disinfectants and whatnot. And that's where I picked up this film, because as of Tuesday, the Ben Affleck film, The Way Back, was released on a price level where I didn't feel like I was just overspending and stuff. It was one that I was curious about seeing back in March in theaters when it originally was released. And yeah, this came out March 6th, and then a couple weeks later, theaters were like dunzo. So did not make its budget back, unfortunately. Probably considered a failure, but there's just weird circumstances in this regard, and semi-autobiographical in the fact that we know the struggles that Ben Affleck has had in his personal life. It's the reason for the dissolution of his marriage with Jennifer Garner. And as somebody who has struggled with similar demons from time to time in my career, both as a musician and as a YouTuber and in just life in general, this hit pretty close to home, although when you realize like the full scope and the spectrum of why he's just in this descent into, drinking depression and stuff, makes a little bit more sense without like spoiling stuff too excessively. But this is him repairing with Gavin O'Connor, who he did 2016's The Accountant with. But Gavin is no stranger to these sort of like inspirational, albeit the other one's a little bit more inspirational than this one, sort of sports films. So he did Miracle with Kurt Russell many years ago, which was about that Miracle on Ice versus the Russians that the Americans had in the 80s. And then also in 2011, he did Warrior with Tom Hardy and Joel Edgerton. So, I mean, he has that pedigree, okay? And he also had the, previous history with Affleck. And yet, this is it's not as inspirational, I guess, as I was expecting. And, I mean, maybe that kind of should have been expected by the trailer, by the subject matter, stuff like that. But the thing is, I love basketball, okay? My mother played basketball in college. My grandfather, her father, on that side of the family, rest peacefully. He's been passed away since the 90s, but yeah, he was also a basketball coach in high school. He did some college assistant work and stuff like that. And even though, soccer is probably what I ended up playing a little bit more, maybe was a little bit more skilled at when I was in high school, but basketball, especially as far as watching it, has always been my first love, and I just didn't have as much skill. I tried to be the Steve Nash, love my Phoenix Suns and everything. You guys have probably seen me wearing those jerseys and different things here, but yeah, basketball is just where my heart gravitates towards, and the loss of the season this year with, COVID, Corona, the Rona, as I heard this baseball player calling it recently. But yeah, so this was really tailor-made to be something that I would really be into. A very just harrowingly tough performance from Ben, letting it all hang out, being very real about stuff, and he brings it in this. He is as believable as you could imagine about this guy who his family is pretty much donezo in a lot of ways. He had a child that passed away, and that is the one thing that I can't remember if they mentioned in the trailers or not, but it is the reason for him spiraling, into this bit of nastiness and the dissolution of his marriage, who I believe it was the same actress who played the Shiva on The League, which I love so much with Duplass and, Kroll, and such a great cast on that. But yeah, so that's his estranged wife, who he's still technically married to, but that he's working, doing some construction stuff in California, and he's just drinking himself to death. Going full force at it, and same bar every night, being carried home by this older black guy who obviously has an affinity and care and compassion for him, but yet the enabling is still happening from that bartender who just sets him up, every single night. But the little just, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess maybe the light at the end of the tunnel, perhaps, of this darkness that he's embroiled within is the fact that he gets a call from his old high school, and their basketball coach has basically had this abrupt heart attack, and even though he's expected to make a full recovery, his wife is like, Dunzo, nope, you are not going to be coaching anymore. And so they reach out to Jack, our guy here, played by Affleck, and he shows back up, and he is it's the typical team of misfits, you know, where they haven't been to the playoffs in 25 years, and he's trying to light a fire under their ass and get them motivated. He butts heads theologically, I guess, you know, with both the assistant coach and the father, who is like kind of another assistant, but he's more on like the religious side, with this being a Catholic school and all. And so, yeah, I was kind of surprised to see Affleck in California as opposed to in Boston, where he's done, you know, so many different, things and things that he's directed and acted in and whatnot. But yeah, it was in Cali, where I would imagine he lives now, although I don't know 100% for sure. But it does delve into the tropes of, okay, you know, montages of getting this team in order, and, you know, him being so hard-nosed and play with a chip on your shoulder, and he's dropping lots of profanity, you know, F-bombs, and saying shit all the time, and, you know, blasphemous goddammits and whatnot. So his approach is very off-putting initially, but it's overlooked when the results start to surface. And so, yeah, as opposed to initially where they're like, you know, you can't talk like this in front of the kids, and, you know, just being so vulgar, they ease back on him. But what they can't ease back on is the drinking, which you can tell for a while. He like takes the foot off the gas pedal when he's really getting into this. And then, without spoiling stuff, there is an instance shortly before the beginning of the third act where he is reminded of so much with his son, and there's something that happens with his estranged wife, who he's not technically divorced from just yet. And it just puts him right back into it, man. And it gets bad, without spoiling. Maybe not quite as bad as I was anticipating, or fearing is probably a better way of putting it. But yeah, it gets there. And it's that proverbial, AA thing of hitting rock bottom. And so everybody has to hit rock bottom before they really just realize that it's time for a change, and time to really admit to yourself that you can't continue doing this and survive. And heavy hitting stuff, man. Heavy hitting stuff. Affleck's performance is fantastic. I don't think he gets enough dramatic credit as an actor. He's been getting a lot more acclaim as a director recently, you know, between stuff like The Town and Argo, I think was the other one, if I remember correctly, not to be confused with Fargo, obviously. But he's great in this, you know. His performance is heartbreakingly sincere, but also selfishly asshole-ish. And you have to have that dichotomy when approaching this sort of subject. The supporting cast is all good. The kids aren't as memorable as I was really wanting them to be, and they don't really get the adequate screen time that I was wanting either. Like, there is some butting of heads with a point guard and also with a center, but really aside from that, the other kids are very one note and are not fleshed out. I mean, there's this womanizer showboaty kid, you know, who is just, I don't know, just very much the one-dimensional sort of character that I had feared this would have. And I've seen, I mean, if you've watched Hoosiers, if you've watched a lot of the other sports films that I like that aren't basketball related, you know, I mean, some that come to mind are the Little Giants, and The Big Green is another great one, the Mighty Ducks, or at least the first two Mighty Ducks. Two I actually personally prefer. There's really, really well fleshed out, younger characters as our athletes in this. And even think back to Coach Bombay in that Mighty Ducks movie, man. I mean, Emilio Estevez was terrific as that, flawed coach who was trying to turn his life around. That's much more of a feel-good movie in comparison with this, but that's definitely one of the major detriments, where this is definitely Affleck's thing, and it's all about him at the end of the day. Aside from those couple other characters, there's nothing that's properly developed with some of these players, and I don't know, it could have been better, but it was definitely not bad, and it's well shot. I mean, Gavin definitely, does a hell of a job in the directorial department, although he hadn't directed anything in 4 years, so obviously biding his time, trying to figure out the proper project and stuff like that. But yeah, this is definitely a very solid and maybe not enjoyable sports film based on just the harsh aspect of the subject matter that's being tackled here, but it was definitely strangely satisfying, I would say. And I mean, if you're into the rags to riches, which is definitely what you kind of get in here, I mean, stretch way back to, God, Bad News Bears, I think was one of the first to do it in the 70s with Walter Matthau, right? So I definitely prefer more of the comedic rags to riches, like those other movies I mentioned that are a little more in the lighthearted tone in comparison with this one. But if you dig a sports film, and especially if you dig basketball, because there is good theory, especially with this being a smaller basketball team that he is, just set to coach, and he's trying to figure out how do we gain an advantage by being so small. I loved my Phoenix Suns in the D'Antoni era with the small ball, and I know he's still trying to do that in Houston, but yeah, from a basketball standpoint, there is sound coaching that's implemented into this as well. It just could have been better, which is always a bummer, but nonetheless, a great performance from Affleck, a sport that I adore. So I'm going to give this 3 out of 5 Fuego Fireballs. That's right, everybody. This is definitely a bueno film, and if you are down with shooty hoops, to quote South Park, it's definitely one that you need to check out. So I've been Jaime En Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTubies, just like you see here below. I try to do an episode every day on this channel since relaunching it last year. Doesn't always happen, and life in quarantine has been very strange, but more often than not, Mondays are either an animated or a musical. Tuesdays and Fridays are FRESCA FUEGO, which is where I talk about something new, because you're seeing this on a Friday. Wednesdays, I do some comic coverage. Thursday is a throwback. It's a retro Fuego. Saturday is it's been dubbed Shitter Day at this particular point because it's something recently awful that I've watched. That's what gets that designation. And then lastly, Sundays are my weekly worship for Star Wars. If you dig spectacular stuff, you need to jump over to the other channel. That is my main channel of sorts, and that's main because of the fact that almost 33K in the subscribership, and over here I'm still like 10 or 15 or whatever the heck it is from reaching a single 1,000. But please like, share, subscribe here if you want to help get me over that threshold, so I have a lot more creator just capacity and capability here. But yes, the Horror Show channel is where myself, along with Cecil, Robert, Marsha, Susie, Andrew, we have a very cool crew over there, and we do trailer reactions, reviews to films, television, comics. I do a weekly Stephen King show over there, as well as unboxings, video game Let's Plays. The sky is the limit, and yes, for all the spectacular, that is your best destination. So, I've been Fuego, y'all been Rat Status, and until the real of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, Cinemigos, constant readers and viewers alike, say thank you, and I'm hopeful that we get to share more of this film palaver sooner rather than later. And until then, watch more movies, and stay indoors. Por favor.